to another episode of the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. Today's episode is all about us, getting to
Yay.
know us. We're going to interview each other for your benefit. So if you don't want to know anything about us, this would be a good one to skip. But of course you do. So otherwise, why would you be else would you be turning into the Old Lady Hour?
Exactly.
So we decided we're going to just alternate questions that we have about each other. And so Cheryl's going to ask the first question. So we're going to get right into it.
Yeah, and ignore the traffic noise outside.
We're in a noisy place.
Yeah. Anyway, we're here at Lorrie Lane Studio in beautiful downtown Tuscaloosa. 2420 Gary Fitz Street. And our first question goes to both of us.
Okay.
And the question is, why haven't we broached politics as a subject for the Old Lady Hour yet?
Okay. There's no right answer for this, right? It's not a quiz.
That's
okay.
right.
Okay, good. Because I was like, I won't win this quiz. Well, first of all, I think because there's lots of podcasts about politics.
Good point.
So there's that. The other thing is, well, we just haven't had a chance to. So
Right.
That's another part of it. And then the point I usually make with people is a lot of people say, well, I'm not really political. And I think politics really means the people, the society that you live in. And so in a broader sense, politics is like air.
Right.
You really you have it, whether you see it or understand it or not. It's there, and you kind of only notice it if it's bad or you're without it, because then you can't breathe. So it's definitely there. So that's a little bit of an answer.
Okay.
What's your answer?
Well, I have a couple of points, and one actually goes right along with what you were saying, and that is politics is everywhere. Politics is in the nuclear family, politics is in the workplace, politics is in the community, and so you can't avoid politics. You can ignore it to your peril, but it's everywhere. But for me, if we were to actually devote a podcast to politics, y'all might not like me anymore.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think it's covered really well, especially contemporary politics right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we're all talking about. But we have some other interesting things to say, so we're just going to broaden the conversation. So I guess it's just in the background.
It's in the background of everything we discuss.
That's right. So is that
Okay.
a good answer?
I kind of like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
we get a star. If you don't like the answer, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
On our YouTube channel.
Use our comments.
We love comments. Okay, so it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to a completely different place in my question.
I'm using notes to ask questions.
Yeah.
Lorrie is not.
I don't have any notes because that's the way I am. That's kind of like, that's a lot the way we are.
That explains us both, actually.
It does.
I have notes and Lorrie doesn't.
Well, I have mental notes. So the completely different question I have is really it's an art question, because we do want to talk about art.
Yep.
And one of Cheryl's projects in college was to create an art installation, and that was part of the class, which was really interesting. And so it's not really a question, but I just question is to tell us about that project, which was called, you want to say? Self-storage. And so thinking about like the many units we see everywhere where you can store all your stuff, which is called self-storage. So, I mean, if you imagine that you're storing the self, it's kind of an interesting thought. So I wanted Sheryl to talk about that project, and also the question I have was, what you got out of doing the installation, and you say where it was, and would you do anything differently now?
Okay. First of all, you said that when Sheryl went to college. Well, just a reminder to our audience that Sheryl is almost 65 and just went to college.
Right. Well, so it was recent.
Yes, it was recent. It was a couple of years ago. I don't know. I don't remember if it was the end of 22 or the beginning of 23, but either way, you have 60 some years of content in your self storage.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to choose from. Another point, the title for it came from Lorrie Lane.
Well, okay.
It was her suggestion.
It was.
And I thought it was brilliant. I almost felt guilty for stealing it.
You didn't steal it. It's right there.
Yeah.
Every
Well,
time, I mean, every time I go by someplace that said self storage, I picture like putting myself inside there. Like,
right.
there I am, stored. So,
Right.
I don't know. Just the way my brain works.
Yeah. So I actually doing that. Oh, another thing I want to mention about it was that it wasn't for an art class per se. It was for an art history class, which is why it was so interesting
Yes, that's why. Right.
that it was assigned. And actually, I was given the opportunity to skip it because I wasn't an art major. I was allowed to skip doing the installation project and write an essay or something. But I had plenty of essays to write on all kinds of topics, so I wanted to jump into the installation project. And it's hard to describe it.
Well, maybe we can put a picture up
Oh
on the
yeah, I've
on
got
the.
pictures.
We'll have a picture, but it had a lot of your history, like little bits and pieces of things that you've done.
Right, and it had a file cabinet for the storage aspect.
Did it have a head with the
It had a
glasses?
styrofoam head with hair and glasses, a little bit of hair. I don't have a whole lot.
Well, anyway, it had a hat, maybe.
It had a hat. It did have a
Yeah.
hat, and it had
And then I think you had some construction fabric,
some
like a fence.
yeah, like a snow fence
Mm-hmm.
and a do not enter or private property sign.
Mm-hmm.
And the file cabinet was a two-drawer file cabinet. One said, I think it said brain or head, I don't know, and then the other one said heart,
Mm-hmm.
and the one with heart had fragile stickers all over
Okay.
it. And then inside the file cabinet were things like ashtrays, prescription bottles, different things to represent like a garden or sports or just whatever I was into. And there was a piece of luggage and had a lot of books, tapes. There were 45 records, 45 RPM records.
Right. You have to describe these, not the number 40, but
Right.
45 playing.
I mean, it was just a whole bunch of stuff that represented the previous probably 50 years of my life. And it was, and I also developed a soundtrack for it, which was really, it brought out a lot of emotion for me. Because if you think about the soundtrack for your life, that's very personal. Everybody has songs that help them get through life.
That's true.
And coming up with that soundtrack was it's not necessarily your favorite songs, but songs that affected you when those songs were new or whatever. And so that was a very important aspect for me. I don't know, I could probably just drone on and on about this project.
Well, and you can mention that it was first shown at the W.
Right.
It was an installation.
Mississippi University for Women.
Yes. And then later it was installed.
It was installed at the Columbus Arts Council,
So
Rosenzweig Arts Center.
in Columbus, Mississippi.
In Columbus, Mississippi, yes. And it
And-
was there for a couple months.
Yeah. So it was kind of an interesting project. And I mean, I think for our listeners, maybe to think about what they would include in something called self-storage.
Right.
This could be an interesting exercise just to think about. But it was also a way to, figure out a little bit more about who you are,
Right.
and what was important to you. And and the soundtrack idea was just an added.
Yeah, because music was so important to me.
So, do you have one song that you remember that was on it?
Oh, I remember several.
Okay. Oh, well, you have to quit.
Yep.
Come in. Oh, come in. Hey, come in.
Come on in. Okay, we're back. We had to take a little break there.
Yeah, it was a fun break. We're in a store after all, so we do have to like stop.
Every so often.
Yeah.
Okay, it's my turn to ask a question, I think. I'm pretty sure you've told me that art is a form of resistance, and others have said the same thing. What do you mean by that?
Well, several things. For one thing, it well, sometimes you don't have to resist anything, but sometimes you do. And sometimes what you're resisting is the dehumanization of society. And art is a very human activity. We're born knowing how to create, and we're born knowing how to make marks and to you know it's the early cave art is still preserved where someone was making pictures of animals.
Right.
So one thing is it's just a human activity um, to create something, and like often it's like symbolic creations, but another way is just when you're creating something, you're helping define who you are as a person, and you're not having someone impose their definition of you on them. So that can be a very powerful thing to be able to define yourself for yourself.
Okay.
And now, of course, that can change over time. Sometimes the art allows you to figure out who you are, and so that goes back to the self storage idea. Um, and also, it's just a form of expression. And so, if you are creating something that's and you are being free about it, in whatever way that is, intellectually or stylistically, um, that is very I guess it is a form of resistance to, again, we're talking about dehumanizing authoritarian structures. And I think, we're dealing with that right now.
Right.
And so and for whatever reason, painting, visual art, theater, music seems to be really threatening to an authoritarianism, and,
Right.
and it constantly is. Poets, writers, it just is that, again, that free expression, that humanizing thing, that and it doesn't have to be overtly political. It doesn't have to have an overt message. It's just really doing what you want to do,
Right.
being who you are. So I think we're in a period of just needing to remember that.
Okay.
So there you go. We did have a show here called The Land of the Free, and at the studio, and we had a number of artists that were invited, and they had all different types of art. It was a really fun party when we had the opening reception, and all different forms of expression in art, different mediums, and I think that was a little more overtly um, political or overt messaging.
Uh-huh.
But even just having the space, showing the paintings that I have, it's just a form of saying this is who I am.
Hmm.
And as my tagline states, being large and unavoidable, taking up room, especially as a woman, especially as an older woman. It's just saying this is who I am. Deal with it.
All right. Yeah.
All right, now we're back again. There's just been a lot of distractions today, so I was answering like serious question, and my mind goes blank. So we're
All
back to
right. It happens.
yes, it does happen. Having a senior moment
Is
because
that what those are?
senior moment we're having them more and more frequently. So my question to Cheryl is really about her definition of who she is, um, and she's changed that. When I first met you, Cheryl, you on Facebook you were gardener Cheryl,
Yep.
and then you changed it to art historian Cheryl.
Yeah, you told me to.
I told you to. It sounds like I'm always telling Cheryl what to do.
She is.
Okay, it's not really true, but anyway,
She just makes good suggestions.
because you have a variety of interests.
Yes, I do.
So the question is really a question so much as like describe some of your interests and how they relate to uh, how much you like to try different things,
Mm-hmm.
and also maybe mention a little bit of like rideshare driving
Hmm.
because
Oh, okay.
that's really interesting to a lot of people. But I mean, I know you like to sew,
Mm-hmm.
you like to garden,
Mm-hmm.
you like to create art,
Mm-hmm.
you like to write, you like to do interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of different
I
things.
like to play poker.
And you like to play poker. You like to work on all the like doing all the technical parts of the podcast.
Yeah.
So that is just a wide variety of things that, and you have time to do them,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. But some of what was financing that was the rideshare driving.
Right.
So maybe just yeah, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, I started rideshare driving when Uber came to Tuscaloosa. They came in 2016. They actually came before that, but the city kicked them out because they wanted to be able to create some laws that Uber had to abide by. But anyway, a couple years after they tried to get in, they got in 2016. And I waited about 3 months to see how it went, and then I signed up to make a little extra money. And here we are in 2025, and I'm still doing it, which is kind of amazing to me because what you're doing is going out there and driving perfect strangers around.
Now you're someone that says you don't like people,
I don't like people.
and yet
And yet, I drive perfect strangers around in my car, my personal vehicle. I don't know. I don't get it. I enjoy it, but it doesn't make sense to me.
but you've had some adventures that way.
I have had some adventures, and
There's a wide variety of people who are in Tuscaloosa needing rides.
that's true. That's true. You get the well-to-do people who can afford to pay somebody to drive them around. And then you get the people who are just trying to get through the day and make enough money to feed themselves and their families, and they have to have a ride by somebody who can drive them around because they can't afford a car. Or maybe they can afford a junker, but they can't afford the insurance. So, you basically get all types. And I have to say, my favorite people are, first of all, the ones who don't smell like weed when they get in my car. And
But it's not legal here yet.
it isn't, but it certainly is pervasive.
Yeah.
Or and number two, and actually maybe number two is number one. I don't like the people who have a whole lot of perfume or cologne on. I mean, instant headache.
So word to the wise, if you're going to be taking a car, cut back on.
Yeah, on the smelly stuff. So like, I will give you a poor rating if you stink.
Oh yeah, it's right because you get to rate customers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then there's been times when we've had, let's just say, different personages in town for different political events,
Sure.
and you've had some of the people involved with the campaigns.
Right.
You've had people in the press, and they forget that you're
But
that you can hear everything they're saying.
not only that, I'm recording everything they're saying.
Okay, that's right. So,
Because I have a dash cam, and most drivers should have a dash
and
cam, and
that's
that includes people who don't drive people around.
yep, that's just for your protection.
Yep.
So, now is this? Somebody wonder, as a single older woman,
Uh-huh.
have you ever felt like you've been in a dangerous situation?
Okay, that's the question I was hoping you were going to ask,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the question that I think I feel a little resentment towards that question. And I'll tell you why. It's a good question, and it's an appropriate question. But what it does is it makes the subject of the question remember the bad rides.
Okay.
It's kind of triggering.
So you've had them, but
I
you just
have.
okay.
I just want to pop in here and make something very clear. I have nothing against Lorrie asking me this question, and I have nothing against answering it on this podcast. The problem I have is with perfect strangers when they get in my car and they ask me if I've ever been unsafe or felt unsafe in my car when I'm picking people up. I think that's really inappropriate, and I think that when you get into a stranger's car to take a ride, I don't think that's really the conversation you want to have.
But I would say when I get asked, this is me answering a question, which out of turn, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay.
Um, because I've run retail, my gallery situation, and I'm usually here by myself. I
Right.
mean, I haven't been since Cheryl's around, but still, I mean, I'm here often by myself
Right.
in a store, or I drive at night by myself, or do things by myself. And I think what I resent is the feeling that as a woman by herself that I'm not safe
Right.
and that I should take precautions.
Right.
And I was like, no, I can take care of myself. I'm fine. Please don't assume that I'm vulnerable.
Right.
Well, because I mean, I am, but everyone is.
Everyone is.
Everyone is.
And every Uber driver has had a bad experience.
And I feel like that if that, being like worried about someone's safety in some ways can be a way to keep them from being out in society.
That's right.
And so,
yeah, and
too bad. I'm going to be out there.
Like, I'm going to be going traveling soon by myself, 1,500 miles on the road. Years ago, people thought I was insane.
Really?
Yes. When I was young and I would do it, I would drive 4,500 miles. I would drive from Ohio to Phoenix and back.
I guess before cell phones too.
Yeah.
Right.
And GPS. But after a while, my family got used to it.
Yeah.
That's what Sheryl does. She does it by herself. She's not worried.
Yeah.
Whether I should be or not. And they figured out that I wasn't helpless after the first tire change or two, that you have to do on the side of the road.
So there you are.
There you are.
Okay.
And I'm still having tires blow every once in a while.
It does happen.
That's okay. I can take care of it.
Well, I can't, but
well, if I can't, I will call someone.
I have someone. We have someone in our family that takes care of all our auto needs, so we're very, very grateful.
Well, I am getting a little older now, so the last 2 tire blowouts I had, I did have someone come and change them for me.
Okay. So that was my question. Now it's your turn.
Oh, okay. Well, let me check my notes. Okay, a couple of years ago, you painted a series of faces, and you had an exhibit up at Low Mill in Huntsville, which you're also there now. I'll put a little plug in for that in a minute. But you had an exhibit with Steve Davis, who did big metal faces, and I just want to know what the impetus was for the faces you painted for that show. And it wasn't for that show that you did them. You did
That's
them,
right.
and then you got the show.
Okay. So, yes, there was no reason at first other than I was trying to do something that didn't work out, which often is the case. So I was trying to paint some very generic faces. My daughter Liz Lane, who's an artist, kind of has these series of faces, but they're recognizably faces, but they're not real specific. And so I'm like, hey, I want to do that. Also, this is just a technical thing. I use watercolor paper, and to put oil on it, I have to gesso it. So there's another layer of surface layer of gesso. And then, and I think it was getting ready for a class, but it was using acrylic paint instead of oil. And when I used acrylic paint on the gessoed surface, I realized I could lift a lot of the paint once it was on there because it didn't sink in.
Okay.
So was in a way a form of resist,
Okay.
but not resistance. Just anyway. Um, so I had some black paint and I was trying to draw like a very generic face. And after like putting some water on it and just smushing it around and like taking a paper towel and taking off the excess water and paint, a very specific, very 19th century old face, like from like a tintype or something, it emerged.
Wow.
And I'm like, what is that? And so I have to say, this was in 2020. It was kind of in that summer, going
Yeah.
into fall, kind of in the middle of the pandemic. Things were
Uh-huh.
pretty bad. And I was just here in my studio by myself, like, um, working on things. And so then I tried another one, and a very different face emerged. And so I kept trying it. I'm like, what if I just would generally put in some paint like eyes, nose, mouth in that just space. And these are on small pieces of paper, so they're very small. And then again, kind of like smush them around with a palette knife, do a little bit of lifting with the water, and every time it was a different face and a different, fairly specific looking face.
And the
Different,
faces we were emerging rather than
yeah. I
you
mean,
actually purposely painting.
right. I mean, I was doing little manipulations, so it wasn't like completely just
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's just different genders, different like ages, and they'd have like a hat or they'd have like glasses,
Yeah.
and so some because they're in black and white, they're kind of looking a little ghostly.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I was doing them for a while. I did a bunch of them. I'm like, I don't know what these are.
But were you feeling compelled to do them?
Um, well, I was curious.
Okay.
So it was really, I don't know, compelled at that point, other than like, this is interesting. I'm going to keep trying.
Okay.
So, and I remember I had the table that we're using now for our broadcast right here.
Yeah.
I had it facing the wall, and I was standing with my back to the door
Okay.
of the studio, and I was working on them that way, standing up, and I got kind of afraid. Like I was spooking myself with them. So
Wow.
I stopped. I'm like, okay, that's enough. I don't know what these are. It was October. I'm like, ha, Halloween.
Yeah, right.
So I put them out, and I didn't know what to think of them. So then a few months later, I'm like, okay, let me see if this still works. Like, can I still do this? So I did another set, and yet again, a whole different. Each time it's a different face. So, um, so I've gone through several iterations of this, and finally, like, yes, there was one time I came in to make some more, and I did feel like there. One example is I did a little face, and it was like, whoa, that's weird. He's like smoking a cigarette. So this
Yeah.
is the image, and it was like this younger man, and kind of like it looked like someone,
Right.
but I don't know who it was. And then next day, I saw there was that face was in the news feed of they were a missing person.
Yeah.
And so things like that have happened repeatedly. So it's a little spooky.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm tapping into with these spaces. But anyway, yes, we did do a show with them and with Steve Davis's very large wire sculptural heads he did of his heroes.
Uh-huh.
And mine, by contrast, were I just called them um, just person. So
Right.
I just numbered them.
Okay.
So like they're missing people, like
they're John and Jane Doe.
yeah, they're just really they're anonymous. We don't know who they are, but they definitely want to be found somehow.
Yeah.
They want to be memorialized somehow.
Like they need an escape or something.
They need to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really different from what I normally do.
Right.
It's really, really different from my other art. It does kind of, I'm not gonna lie, they scare me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what that is.
Well, some of them are kind of creepy looking.
Yeah, there's definitely some disturbing ones, and there's definitely ones that are kind of nice. So it was like they're really different personalities, And I don't know how much art is involved in that other than, I am making them,
I don't know. They're just really good.
but they're very quick. Like it takes me very little time to make them, but I can only do it like in certain moods.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost like channeling
Yeah.
a little bit, even though I'm not sure that I'm skeptical enough to
Yeah, I
like,
mean, some people will think that's just bullpucky. That's
yeah, yeah,
hocus pocus,
yeah, and I'm not
whatever.
right, and so I'm a little bit, I'm very much in the skeptical part of things,
Yeah.
except that when I'm not,
Right. Right.
except when it's proven
Yeah.
otherwise. And so, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
I mean, that one where the guy, I think it was on the Facebook feed.
mm-hmm,
He that face showed up. It, honest to God, it was on a news. It was like al.com.
yeah, and
Somebody was missing from Opelika or somewhere.
Opelika, yeah,
Opelika, sorry.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was just very strange. I don't, and they definitely look like different people I know, or they
Yeah,
look
I
like,
recognized one of them too.
yeah. So
It's bizarre.
it is really strange, and it feels very outside of me as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
because again, it's not really like the type of art that I make.
Yeah, well, and I want to thank you for talking about it because it is kind of weird, and a lot of people might not like this part of the segment, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, well, and I feel like that's where being a creative person, sometimes you have to go into directions that you're not planning on.
Or maybe not comfortable with.
Right. And some of it's just like, okay, I'm going to explore this part of things because I mean, just to do it, just to see where it takes you, and that if they're, as I said, it's real different from what I normally do. I don't know if I'll do any more.
And I think for people who actually see those paintings in a show, and the most recent show was Liz Lane Gallery, for one day only. I think the people who see those faces, they're affected by them.
Yeah, and it's not really they don't really like them necessarily
Not necessarily, but
because
they are affected by
yeah, I
them.
think there's something there, put it that
There's
way.
something a little disturbing about
And as just by contrast, almost everything else I do is really not disturbing. It's
them.
really
Right,
people always say, "Oh, it makes me happy," and I'm like,
right,
"That's really good. That's
yep,
really where I usually am."
right.
But I don't know if it was just because we were going through something with a pandemic. That's that how it started. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my follow up question for you is, where have you? And we were talking about this earlier, just in conversation about your life as a once you get into your 60s, you've had decades now of your life going one direction and then poof going a different direction. So where have you felt like you were kind of on a path and then got off the path and maybe it took you someplace else?
Well, I think I've been my own worst enemy most of my life. Um, I think my path has been anything but straight. And I think that there have been so many forks in my path that were either self imposed or imposed upon me. This is a tough question for me.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's a very thought provoking question. I think about when I was in my 20s and what the visions I had in my head. Uh, Maybe getting married, maybe having kids, although that wasn't necessarily that important to me. Um, but that never happened. None of it. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know what happened.
Well, but lots of things happen. So, you've done a lot of really different things, and then Did you ever think you'd end up doing a podcast out of an art studio?
Never.
Because I didn't either. I mean, the art studio, yeah, but the podcast, no.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to ask you that question, but
Okay.
I forgot to ask it.
Well, so here it is.
But yeah, life happens, and I think uh, some people know what they're going to do, and some people don't. Some people know what they want to do, and they can't get there for one reason or another. Most of my issues had to do with finances. I couldn't go to school when I wanted to. When I could go to school, I was also working 3 jobs. Always one, at least one, was full time. So I only had time to take one class or 2 classes or whatever. But I didn't have that 4 years that I could go to school,
Mm-hmm.
dedicate to that, and then go on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
Which is, I think, there's a lot of people in that situation
right?
where you don't really have a lot of choice. You're just you're
You,
just like, you
you,
got to survive.
that's right. You're just getting by. But the thing is, you can always go back. I just found an essay yesterday at my house that I wrote in 1992 for a class called Plato's Myth of the Cave. And 1992, I was 32 years old. And that was the year I got my 2-year degree after 14 years of part-time school.
Wow. 14 years. You are nothing if not
Off and on.
persistent.
Yes, yes. 14 years it took to get that 2-year degree. And then, at the age of 64, I finally wound up with my 4-year degree.
There it is. But you did it. So, and I mean, I guess uh, there was a little prompt that we had because you were looking through some things and you also found an old prom picture.
Yes.
And so we're posting them.
Yeah.
I went this morning, I found 2 prom pictures. One I knew I had, one I didn't know I had. And it's just funny looking back at our very young selves
Yes.
and almost like, do you ever feel like you talk to your younger self and say, it's going to be okay,
Yeah.
or watch out for?
Yeah. No, I've never thought like that.
Okay. I think like this all the time.
I wish I had had my future self around to say, fight harder. I don't know.
Okay. So a lot of times people get asked, what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah.
But I'm sometimes at this point, I'm almost asking myself, and I'll ask you, what would you tell your future self?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
So you're telling your future self.
That's right.
I'm telling my future self, watch that step.
Splat.
Make sure your bicycle handles are on tight.
Oh no.
Okay, your turn.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
It's my turn. Okay, I'm going to ask you an easy one. How many galleries represent your work right now?
That's not as easy as you think.
I want to hear the roll call.
Okay, because there's not as many as there used to be. So currently, I'm here at the Lorrie Lane Studio in beautiful downtown Tuscaloosa.
2420 Gary Pitts Street.
Yes, there we are. And online at LorrieLaneArt.com or Instagram, Lorrie S. Lane. So just those are the plugs there.
Yep.
And I am at Kathleen's Interiors in Decatur, Alabama.
I like Decatur.
I'm at Lorrie and Sheryl Gallery in Fairhope, Alabama.
Never been there.
But Fairhope's beautiful.
I need to go.
Yes, it's great. And I am at Sunshine Art Gallery outside of Athens, Georgia.
Cool.
And so
I've been there.
yeah. And so it was at the Liz Lane Gallery in Hoover,
Uh-huh.
but my daughter Liz is really concentrating more on that being a studio space rather than a gallery space.
Okay.
And so, which I completely understand. So I'm not even, so we'll mention that, but
Yeah.
we're also right now she's coming in transition, and I mean, she really is such a successful painter at this point that she
Right.
really should devote most of her time to creating
Right.
and not really trying to be a gallerist, although she enjoys that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, so and then I work with an art rep, which a lot of people are a little bit mystified by, but Victor Fine Art.
Oh my God, he's gonna walk in any minute, isn't he?
He is on his way here. He represents me to multiple places, and so some of my art is actually at some galleries, but it's sold through wholesale. So I don't really have a direct connection with them.
Okay, but Victor does the sales.
He does the sales, and then he represents me to John Richard, which makes fine art reproductions, among other things. And so there's some G clays of my paintings through John Richard, but then they're resold through all kinds of other outlets.
Okay.
So it's just kind of out there.
Yeah.
Um, so my ideal situation right now is really at one point I think I was in a lot more galleries and I really enjoyed that. I did a lot more shows,
Uh-huh.
but I really am enjoying just having people come to me.
Uh-huh.
So my ideal situation is not really having a lot of galleries, but really having people come here or do online, um, or working with what I have, um, because it just seems like a good model.
Okay.
Lorrie has one final question for me, but before we get to that, don't forget to stop in at Lorrie Lane Studio at 2420 Gary Fitz Street in Tuscaloosa. We're publishing this episode on June 14th, so the upcoming weeks will be by appointment only or by coincidence, which means either myself and or Lorrie will be here, and you can pop in if you see the open sign on the door. Otherwise, you can call Lorrie and make an appointment. Thanks.
Well, as I said, there's not really a prize for this or
Yeah.
a wrong answer,
Okay.
but this is about writing
Okay.
because this was a part of, I mean, something that we've been meeting pretty often with a writers group, and we have a kind of literary bent to our lives, somewhere out there.
Right.
And so I'm just going to ask you about your writing projects.
Okay. I have a few projects. One is I'm doing a book about contemporary Southern women artists, of which you were one.
Yeah, all right.
And it's going to be an oral history project. So
Can you describe what that oral history is?
yes, whereby I do interviews with the artist and they tell me stories. I don't necessarily ask probing questions. I will ask questions based on what I'm told, and the artist tells their story.
So it's really more like a way for people to record their memories rather than like an expose.
Exactly. Now, there will be specific questions, but the subjects can go wherever they want with their answers.
Yeah, that's just really a way to get people to remember things.
Yes. So the reason I'm doing it is because when I was in school, I was doing some work on artist Elaine Goodman in Columbus, Mississippi, and I was trying to do some research for context, and there just wasn't very much available about Southern women artists, contemporary Southern women artists. And so I decided that if you can't find what you're looking for, you need to create it. So I'm going to have a diverse group of women represented in this book. It'll be, originally I was thinking just Mississippi and Alabama, but there might be a couple people in Georgia I want to cover as well. So I don't want to limit it as long as they're deep south. So
That sounds good.
yeah, should be interesting. And then I'm going to be a contributing author for a book, the title of which I should have, but I don't have memorized.
That's all right. It's not released yet, so maybe yes, you don't want to give away too much here.
Yeah, it'll be released sometime next year. I will have a chapter in it. It'll be a scholarly book on using the use of discards in creating art. And my chapter will be a chapter on Elaine Goodman from Columbus, Mississippi, and how she creates art with junk, and how she procured junk and all that.
Okay.
And then the third book is also contemporary Southern artists, and it will be about
You don't have to say you're. So it's in production right now.
yes,
So
yes, it is heavily in production right now. It'll be an interesting book. It'll be another book that can be used for scholarly purposes and or for the general public.
and all of these projects, really, I have to say, are on your own.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'm working as an independent scholar, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Makes it a little more difficult because you don't have the financial support of a school or publishing house or whatever. But I'm doing it on my own terms, and I'll get there.
Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty exciting. These writing projects are exciting.
Yep.
And you have to really be quite disciplined.
Right. Hi, Victor.
Yeah. Well, here's my art rep. So that's how
Wow.
we're gonna end
I
this
guess
show.
that's how we're going to end this show. But I wanted to watch my shows.
Yeah. Well, let's go watch our shows, but it'll have to be after Victor's here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.